Okay, so the first thing is we want to, as always, want to talk a little bit about platform updates in the Skillable Studio platform. Okay, so some of these things are things that we've already released. Okay, some of these are actually things that are going to go to production today. So effectively tonight, as far as I'm concerned, because it happens while I'm sleeping. Okay, so just to be aware of that. So some of the things you might go, I've not seen that, or I can't see that if you go into your account, and that's because it's more than likely one of the features that is going to get pushed tonight. Okay, so a couple of things which are either important to you because it's something you do, or actually you don't care about at all. So these are really both related to cloud lab environments. Okay, so the first thing, we've just made life a little bit easier for lab developers that are looking at lab content and lab instances where there's maybe an issue. So when you looked at a lab instance, I'm sure you've all got familiarity of looking at lab instances, and there's lots of details about what data center, all that sort of stuff. If it's a cloud lab, one of the things that it puts in there is the subscription pool name. In the past, it just put the name and you then have to go searching for the subscription pool. Now you can actually click straight on a link and it will take you across to the subscription pool. So it links those two objects together when you're trying to investigate and diagnose. It's not a big thing. It's just an operational efficiency as far as for lab developers that are maybe troubleshooting and need to look at both objects. The second component, again, is really quite a big, significant security improvement for us. When we provision a cloud lab, and those that attended the Summer of Cloud that we did last year will be familiar that there's this process we go through when we provision resources in the cloud, and that's done effectively at an administrative level. Once that's done, we apply something called an access control policy. And then anything else that happens within that lab is actually restricted by that access control policy. So effectively, even automated activities like lifecycle actions, PBT scripts, all those things, they were bound by the same security rules. So one of the things that's now been introduced is the ability to use alternative credentials for those automated activities. So for lifecycle actions, for activity-based assessments and performance-based testing objects. So you can use an alternative credential set for that. Those credentials will still have an access control policy applied to them, but they could have a different one to what the one that the user's actually running under. Okay, so that can provide either a higher security scenario where those you can guarantee those objects, for example, can't write, can't delete. They can literally just assess if that's the requirement you want. So it's just a way we've improved and given organizations more security control that they actually want in place. So for a lot of customers, they would see them as quite minor changes, but for some customers, they're quite core and quite important. Another feature, which for me is quite important, and I used to put this down as a bug, and everyone used to be really grumpy that I used to say it was a bug because they used to go, but it wasn't designed to work that way. But from my point of view, I still felt it was a bug, even though it said it, just because of the way the user interface looked. So I'm still going to say it's a bug, and we've fixed it now. And that's to do with outcomes. So hopefully, some of you have got familiarity with outcomes technology. So when you can have an automated activity of some description, or even a question, and you can then do something based on an outcome. So effectively, you can set a variable. You might jump to a certain page in the instructions, those sort of things. So with outcomes, there was, for me, a little bit of an issue in terms of how they worked. So I'm just going to go across to hopefully a lab profile I've got somewhere. And I did have a few of them. I've just lost them all now. Just bear with me for a second. I had a nice set of pages all ready to go. There we go, let's get rid of that. And let's just drag this across. So this is just pretty boring lab profile, just a Hyper-V basement. If we're going to edit the instructions, okay, hopefully in here, and we'll see we've got an activity in here. Okay, this activity actually has two scripts associated with it, script 1 and script 2, really quite boring. Okay, so what used to happen, okay, is script 1 would execute, okay, and then script 2 would execute, okay, and then we would set the outcome values, okay. So effectively, if script 1 passed, we would then actually set this variable, in this case, to the value of correct. If script 1 failed, we would actually set this variable to wrong, okay. The key thing was, even though we have outcomes attached to each script, so I could have had outcomes here, I could put a third script in and have outcomes. The outcomes only got set after all of the scripts executed, okay. What's now changed is the outcomes now get set after the script they're connected to, okay. So what now happens is when script 1 executes, based on the results of this, it will then set the variable. The system will then execute script number 2, okay. And and for me, that was the way before I worked at Skillable, that was the way I sort of thought this technology would have worked, because of the way that it's drawn. So it's sort of connecting the outcomes to a particular script, okay. And that was, in terms of a process, was quite important to me, because what I would want to be able to do is potentially test for the second outcome in this case, or test the outcome in the second script, and then make decisions in the script what I might go and do next, okay. So effectively, if they got script 1 right, I might then go off and do all of the checks in script 2, because I need a second script to do that. Whereas actually, if they got script 1 wrong, I'm more likely to know there might not be a point check in script 2, because if they didn't get the first one right, they couldn't have got the second bit right, and I could have put some control in there and logic and things, okay. So hopefully, just to sort of explain how they are different. So outcomes are now set at the end of the execution of the script the outcomes are connected to, okay, as opposed to being set at the end of all the scripts being executed in that activity. So hopefully that makes some sense. Cool. Before I get into the 2 big feature differences that you're going to see, these are actually going to be things that are going to be released tonight. Has anybody got any questions in here? Yeah, absolutely right, John. Instead of using the set lab variable option, yeah, which is the way that I've done it until this was fixed. Cool. Okay. So storage management improvements. Okay, so a little bit of history here, because I know some of you use things like our feedback site, which obviously we love you for sort of giving us ideas how you'd like to see the product improve and evolve over time. And one of the areas that we've actually had some of the most requested updates to our platform is to do with the way we manage storage, okay. And quite possibly for some customers, they might have been having those conversations with us for several years and not a lot's changed, okay. There's a reason it's taken a long time. If we actually look at the Skillable Studio platform, one of the most mature pieces of the technology is our storage component. So there's the way that we present storage, the way we manage storage, all those sort of things. Okay, it's incredibly stable, it's incredibly reliable. So when we start to look to sort of try and modernize and add capability and add features, certainly in the early days, it's one of these things that there's a big load of risk associated with it for very little reward. Hopefully in the long term, we get reward and significant reward, but initially there's very little reward and I say lots of risk. So it's taken us a while to make sure we get this right, okay, and not have any sort of negative impacts overall, because if we break storage, that breaks everybody's labs. So that's definitely a place we do not want to be. So it's had to be thought about. It's taken a long time. We've been very careful with how we make it. So the first thing we're doing is we're making improvements to the management of storage. Okay, so this is actually going to be the first of several things that you're going to see. But even this is going to improve your operational efficiency if you interact with your story. So don't think this is the end. This is the start of the journey in terms of the improvements we are going to make for yourselves. So if I bring my browser back, okay, if I come down to sort of a storage page, so some of you might be familiar with a storage page similar to this. This happens to be in our UAT system. And if I come across to the details for this particular bit of storage, you know, I'm sure some of you are very familiar with these sort of screens and things. So where things change is when you actually get into the structures here. So we now have a new table layout that we're going to start presenting. Okay. So at this point, you know, what we're actually allowing you to do is to see if disks have child disks really quickly, really easily. What you can also see very quickly from here is whether labs actually, whether disks are actually connected to profiles or not. Okay, and that's what this references column is. So I'm sure a lot of you are very familiar with potentially selecting a disk, clicking details. So let me try that again. I'm just going to refresh the. Let me just pick a different disk. Just you know, just refresh. All the joys of UAT systems. Just try that again. I'm sure a lot of you are used to. Okay, UAT systems playing up a little bit. So normally, obviously, clicking the details and it's taking you to a page which effectively allows you to then see if it's connected to any lab profiles, those sorts of things. Okay, let me try that one. There we go. Okay, so you can see that file's connected to basically a set of lab profiles, a set of virtual machines. Okay, and then at that point you've gone in there normally and you go, oh, I don't need that. So at that point you might come along and hit delete because there's nothing connected to it. So if I go and select this file here, for example, and hopefully go and do the details again, we see there's nothing in here. So at this point I could then go and highlight it and I could hit the delete. Okay, so the first improvement, albeit we've had to make lots of other changes to get to this point, is of course now you get this on this screen here. You can sort these columns, so I can put all the nodes at the top and then I could choose to select them and I could choose to go and delete them. Okay, so even that's just quite a significant operational efficiency. No immediate timeline, so I'm not going to say this is going to be next month or next quarter. Okay, but the next thing that you'll see get connected to this will be multiple file delete and multiple file move. So you'll be able to select more than one. No, absolutely, that's exactly where we're going, Penelope. That's going to be the next part of the feature selection. So you will be able to do that. Okay, as I say, we're moving this forwards very slowly. I was talking with some of the development people last night because I only found out this was going into production last night, you know, this is also part of the journey to still try to get us to self-service disk merge and so on. That's still something that's on our roadmap and something that we're still intending to deliver as per the conversation I had last night. So step one, from your point of view as customers in terms of the user interface, it's been several steps for us for the things we've been doing in the background. And there's going to be several more steps as we go forward, and you will see some improvements in the UI. And of course, if you attend the lab developer workshops, I will always keep you up to date with these changes as they're coming along. So you should see this tomorrow when you sign into our platform. Okay. Interesting with Penelope being on the oh, Chris, I forgot to let my earlier feedback idea. Cool, excellent. Thanks, great to know that, Chris. And actually, you know, I'd just like to highlight, actually, just reading Chris's message, if anyone's out there, about the fact that he's had feedback recently about something that's been effectively updated, fixed in the platform based on his feedback. You know, we have a much bigger focus now on, you know, taking customer feedback, working with it and updating customers. Sometimes it's a little bit slow depending on priorities, but we're getting much better at that communication, and hopefully lots of you will start to see that. So something else that's released today, so back to Penelope. effectively one of the last pieces of our solution around some of the improvements that we've been making around containers. So some of you would be familiar with, we did a lab developer workshop last year on containers, and we've released a few features over the year with containers. And this is the last big piece of the puzzle as far as we're concerned. Okay, so what we've now done with containers is we've actually created a shared volume that can sit behind a container or containers. So what are we trying to solve here, and what does this actually do? Okay, so if you use containers, you often would pull a container from a container registry or a container repository like the Docker Hub. If you then wanted to make changes to it, you'd make your changes and you'd then have to push it back and save it back into another repository. And that would still be a viable process that you might want to go through. But imagine, for example, you've got something like a container that you're using to teach people software development. So maybe it's presenting something like Jupyter Notebook, or it's presenting Visual Studio as a couple of examples. Okay, and in reality, the container has the environment, Visual Studio, Jupyter Notebook. Okay, and all you want to do is use that container with different sets of source files. So I've got a 101 class where they have one set of sample files they work with and modify. Then I've got a 102 class where they've got, you know, more complex content. Okay, what you don't need to do anymore is have different container images for that. What you can do is you can use the same container and just attach different disks behind the container as the data that a user can work with. Okay, so therefore it makes it much easier for you to update this additional content that a user would use within a container lab. So this is, you know, we believe quite a powerful feature in terms of this type of technology. So at this precise moment, okay, just in case anyone's interested, when you go to our doc site, so docs.skillable.com, you can't find the container volumes document. However, if you put the full URL in, you can find the document that talks about this feature. But let's have a little look. Okay, so let me again go and find my lab environment with my browser. So the first thing, okay, for people that work with containers or customers that work with containers, you will see the containers square will update tonight. Okay, so you will get a new object on here called container volumes. Okay, so this is the new technology we're talking about. Okay, so if I go into container volumes to start with, okay, if I go into the container volume, I'm just going to hit a search here, and we've got some existing ones that I'm going to mess about with in a moment. But if you wanted to create a container volume, it's pretty straightforward. You hit the create and you give it a name. That's it. Simple as that. Okay, because once you've created it, what you can then do is you can then come into the volume, and effectively you can use the files tool here, and this will allow you to upload content into here. So you could come along and you could create a directory. You can put content in the directory. So, you know, I could go and, you know, potentially upload files into here if I wanted to. If I wanted to, I can come and create a new directory in here. You know, whatever I might like that directory to be as part of that change. Okay, so effectively I'm creating this disk, for the want of a better phrase, which we're going to attach to the back of your containers, and I'll get to where in a moment. Okay, so we're going to use the Linux disk mounting technologies, okay, to achieve this. One thing to be aware of, okay, just so you know, because of where we store this, we actually extract this and store this in some cloud storage. When you make changes to the content of a volume, okay, it can take up to 5 minutes for that content to be synchronized. Okay, so if you put new content in here and then you just go and launch your lab's not going to have the content in. Okay, so I just wanted to sort of make that clear. So let's go and look at this lab profile. So this lab profile is the one I've got in this page here. Okay, what's different about this? So if we look at the lab profile itself, the first thing you'll notice, as well as obviously being a Docker profile, it now has a volumes page. Okay, so brand new page here. So think of the volumes page for those that build virtual machine based labs. just like the removable media type page. So the idea is on the volumes page, you can basically add in the containers, sorry, the volumes you would like these containers to have access to. Okay, so just like you would add ISOs in on the back of a virtual machine lab for the different CDs, DVDs that you'd like a virtual machine to have access to. Okay, the next thing you do is on the containers page, once you've added it, so you can see I've got the container volume testing in here. When you come in here, you can then specify which containers are going to have access to that particular volume. Okay, and then you can specify the folder inside the container you want to sort of mount this on the back of. So those that are familiar with Linux, we're using the Linux mount technology to mount this disk onto the back of that folder. Okay, so if I just come out of here, I'll just leave it as it was. We can see that it's connected to the Ubuntu image, but it's not connected to the Kali image. Okay, so if I was just to hopefully go and launch this, once this is launched, if I have a look in the directory tree for the when I mount these, okay, you won't see that it's available on the back of the Kali image, which is the one I'm on at the moment. Okay, but if I go to the Ubuntu image and do an ls-l, you can actually see that I've got the UAT volume in here. And if I was to go into the UAT volume and do an ls, okay, you can see that I've got the files. Okay, so you can actually see up here, it tells me that it's read write with the appropriate permissions. If I was to do something like a touch lg.txt, oops, try that again. I can't type and talk, as you'll discover. Okay. Okay, you can see that it's put that file in there. So that the container images are read write within the context of the instance. Okay. Same as a container would be when you're running it on our platform. The actual file system in the container is read write within the context of an instance. Stuff in there's not preserved once the lab is ended. Okay. So that's the idea.
Is there a size limitation on that volume? Or is there a way to restrict the size?
So we don't have a size restriction that we document. Obviously, this is brand new. I'd have to go and ask that question specifically. I'm just wondering what your content your scenario would be on why you'd want to restrict the size, because obviously users sort of can't upload content. So it's not like they can sort of upload a big folder load of stuff. So
well, I could foresee it being used for like an ISO image or something, and some of ours are extremely large, like 42 gigabytes.
Well, okay. What I'll do is I'll inquire. Actually, maybe Corey, could you do me a favour and just ping Paul Portillo in the background, please, and just ask him if there's a size limit? Cool. Thank you very much, Corey. So we'll see if I can get the answer for that. Yep, no problems. Cool. Because there could, I can imagine, for example, we do have a size limit being imposed, maybe based on the storage where it might be being stored. But yeah, we'll try and get an answer for you during this session. Great question, like that. God, been stumped. Oh dear. Obviously, so that's the container features that's being released tonight, along with the storage updates.